Thanks everybody for joining. This is Bill Van Orsdell and Meghan Pinson. Bill from, of course, I'm from BookFuel, and Meghan is from My 2 Cents Editing. And today's Wednesday webinar is why all writers serious about success should work with a professional editor. And we're making a few changes to our Wednesday webinars. First, we're going to start trying to do a weekly webinar. So this is part one of a two-part series on editing. Number two, we're going to start making our webinars shorter. We're going to aim for a more digestible 30-minute set of content. So we're going to double our frequency, but decrease our duration by half. So same amount of content, we just want to get to more topics during the year. And as well today, although this won't always be true, I don't have much in the way of slides because this is really going to be more of a conversation and an interview, and it's going to be very interactive with the audience today, which I think is going to be pretty important. I'm really counting on you all out there to add questions to stuff that I may be missing or that you'd like to know more from Meghan about. Meghan, if you would, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, how many books you edited last year. Give us the scoop.
Well, okay. I don't know how many books I edited last year. I'm not prepared for that one. But I started My 2 Cents Editing 5 years ago next week, I think. And I've expanded to meet the needs of a lot of self-publishing clients, which I didn't anticipate when I first started editing professionally. I've learned with my clients and figured out how to help them through the process. At this point, I'm offering consulting because I know more than they do. That wasn't the case a few years ago. But mostly what I do is manuscript critique for novels and nonfiction books, and copy editing for pretty much anything, but mostly novels and nonfiction books. At this point, I'm mostly editing the books I've also critiqued.
Fantastic. So that's a great introduction to Meghan. And I just want to remind everyone, before we get started interviewing Meghan with all our great questions, that I'm recording this for playback later. So if you have to leave or if you want to forward this to someone else later to listen to, you should receive a link within the next 24 hours. Meghan has a document, sort of a setup document that will help you as an author, whether you're going to go the traditional route or the self-publishing route. And I'm going to hand her your emails so she can send that to you. If you don't want that, just send me an email and I'll omit your name from the list. That's perfectly fine. And please.
And I swear I won't spam you. I'll send you one document and an invitation to join my newsletter, and I would love it if you did that, if you wanted to stay in touch. Other than that, I'll leave you alone.
Fantastic. And then sort of the only qualification today is that you are thinking about engaging a professional editor, or at least editing your work. I mean, we can talk in more detail about that. But the first thing I want to ask Meghan is, you know, okay, so I'm 2 chapters in to my book, and this is my first book, and I have an outline. Is it too early to work with an editor? How do I figure out what I really want from an editor? I mean, I hear a lot of different editing terms. I know cost is all over the map. Get me in the right frame of mind to make that initial decision so that when I actually call up a professional editor, I know what I'm talking about, or I know what I want, or I know I can ask correctly for what I want. What's available out there?
I think if you're 2 chapters in, you are really jumping the gun by even thinking seriously about working with an editor. Mm-hmm. Unless you already have several books under your belt, you know your process and what you want, and you know that you're not avoiding writing by doing your homework for an editor. Mm-hmm. If you're 2 chapters in, you might be 6 months to 10 years away.
Okay.
But once you are ready, say you finish your first draft, and you would really like to know if you're ready, that's a good time to start reaching out. I would start with your circle of friends, your writing community, if you have one. But definitely start doing your homework and looking in the places that good editors are likely to be found, like the Editorial Freelancers Association. There's I think it's called the Christian Pen, if you'd like, you know, an editor that's Christian. There are more specific organizations that you can go to. The EFA is, of course, my favorite because I'm a member. Mm-hmm. And you can search online with their Find a Freelancer button at the EFA.org to find someone who works with your genre and feels right to you. Follow the links to their websites. Really get someone that, especially if you're writing fiction, that just sort of feels good to you. And then have a conversation with that person. Make sure that it's the right match. I'm not the right editor for everyone. Nobody is. That's why there are a million of us.
All right, so I'm done with my book, and I don't know whether I just want to proofread or whether I want a complete multi-pass edit. I mean, I'm not even sure I know all the right terms. Do I need to go figure that out before I call an editor, or you know, is there somewhere I can go to get a good feeling for that?
Definitely, and it's a really good question with a complicated answer. There is a lot of wiggle room when it comes to the definitions for different editing styles and terms. And make sure when you're talking with an editor to know that you're using the same language. Some editors will use the word proofreading to mean like a very light copy edit, but others will go with the traditional technical definition that proofreading is comparing two versions of a draft and looking specifically for typos, which technically means errors introduced during typesetting, which is obsolete if you're working with digital files. So you may think that you need proofreading. The editor you're talking to may provide that service but calls it copy editing. So make sure you know what language you're talking about. That also applies to developmental editing and manuscript critique. If you're looking for feedback on story or structure, really the content and not just the style and language and grammar, you'll want to know what that editor's approach is to dealing with content. I do manuscript critiques on finished drafts. And so the author will send me that manuscript, and I'll take my time with it and return an annotated manuscript and a critique letter so that they can see my take on what's working in that book and what isn't, where they could go deeper, where they can go for more resources. Someone else may do a similar critique, but like to work with smaller sections of the book and work in tandem with the author, and maybe they call that developmental editing. So it's really important to have that conversation. If your editor's got a great website that explains all of that, bonus, but still make sure you connect with them personally about it.
Mm-hmm. Sarah's got a question for us. She says, how do you budget for the type of editing your manuscript needs, especially if you're trying to limit the overhead costs due to budget constraints?
That's a good question. You can find rates online and in books like Writer's Market that comes out every year. In the front section of Writer's Market, there's a chart called What Should I Charge? And it's really for writers and editors to figure out what other professionals are asking for different types of services. I look at those. I also look at the Editorial Freelancers Association's rates, and those are posted online. The EFA has fewer categories. It's less specific, but they do send out a survey every year, maybe every other year, to find out what the members really are charging for things. Know that there is a huge range for a lot of reasons of what different editors will charge for the same services, or what seem at first like the same services. paying for experience and expertise, and so you can find someone who will do it, you know, for a song, and you will find people that you'll need to budget for quite a while for it. It just know your budget and know that you can find someone to do that. But a lot of times you get what you pay for. So
yeah.
You
know, I've been to a lot of writers' conferences where I've heard an agent or agents say, you know, if your book is already well edited when it comes to us in the slush pile, you probably have some measure of a leg up on other writers. And of course, it never occurred to me. I mean, I guess I sort of hewed to the traditional definition that if I'm going to get traditionally published, then the editing is going to be done on somebody else's dime. Do you work with authors who are trying to go the traditional route, but nevertheless want some level of editing beforehand? And if so, how much editing do you and they do together?
I do work with authors who are trying to get published traditionally and are submitting to agents. Those writers tend to have a good idea of how they're coming across. They've had sort of smaller wins with their writing already. Maybe they've won contests or been published in smaller places. It can help you adjust your expectations if you've already sort of been developing your writing chops. Those authors that I work with tend to be coming to me for critique, and so we're really working on deepening that story. I'm not doing heavy copy editing. I think that someone who needs heavy copy editing is maybe at a disadvantage with an agent because that particular manuscript may come across really strong, but you should be able to do that yourself, at which point the editing process is, if you approach it this way, can really teach you a lot about how to become a better writer, how to work with language and see what your issues are, and how to keep working towards more and more defined issues.
All right, so
everybody's going to always have something to work on. You just want to not be dealing with the same problem with each manuscript. Learn a new lesson each time.
So, you know, if I'm writing a family memoir that I want to do a small print run and hand it out to all the grandkids, versus I'm writing my first romance novel, and my hope is that this is the beginning of a series that takes off like wildfire and I get to quit my day job. Is that important when I start talking to my editor about what my goals are and what I'm trying to accomplish? You know, or like I'm just trying to make it good enough that it can pass through the slush pile. You know, those are three very different approaches to my writing.
They are. Yeah, your goals can really define your process. If you've got a story you want to give to your family and just want to be proud of it, you know that you haven't been writing your whole life, but it's important to you to do this, you'll probably be more comfortable handing over a measure of creative control when it comes to the language, and maybe a little bit of the content organization or which parts are included and which aren't, to your editor. She can help you figure out how to really make that tighter and stronger and flow. And you're not going to worry about whether she moved you know, a phrase from the end of a paragraph to the beginning or rewrote a paragraph even, because your goal is different than if you're submitting to an agent and the lyricism of your work is really important to you. If the prose is vital to you, and that really means a lot, it's going to pain you to see someone revise a sentence or a paragraph. And I mean, know that you're hiring someone to do it, so you've got to kind of be okay with that. You are asking for it. But you'll be looking for a lighter hand if that's your goal. If you've got, say, a romance series that you want to churn out, you know, 1 or 2 a year, and you're self-publishing them and you've got an audience, that's kind of a middle ground. because speed and efficiency are important to you. Ability to meet those deadlines, ability to just tackle a project head on, get everything done, and then when you're done with it, be done with it and move on. You'll sort of prioritize what changes you're okay with. And that's where a sample edit can really, I mean, a sample edit is always very enlightening. You want to see your editor's gut instincts on what needs to be done with that. But if you are a genre author who wants to turn things around very quickly and is meeting the needs of their eager readers, then you probably need to really work with the editor to find out, okay, I'm really cool with you rewriting these paragraphs. I want you to leave this type of thing alone. I've worked really hard to make this happen. But it's fine if you do that.
Okay.
So that's where the relationship with your editor is pretty important.
All right, I want to talk about that process and using it to become a better writer. But first, Sarah's got a question for us, is talking about series, do you tell your editor ahead of time that you're planning on more books, or do you write the whole story and have your editor help you break it down into manageable size books? Or what advice would you have for Sarah?
I think letting your editor know that you're writing a series is a good idea. It depends on how closely you want to work with that person. And if you are looking for someone to work with long term, if you want to stay with the same person and develop that relationship over years and over the whole series or more, the more you talk, the better. The more you learn how to read each other's minds, it's fantastic. But don't be afraid to go back then. Say it's been a year or two since you've worked on the first book. Your writing has likely changed at that point. You've solved a lot of the problems that your editor pointed out in the first book. And maybe it's not so much exposition and sort of tension-killing point of view issues that you're dealing with, but maybe you're dealing more with character development or something, or more flow. It can't hurt to say, I've got this new manuscript. Would you mind doing a sample edit on this? Like, what's your gut instinct? Maybe we hit reset at this point. I would just say keep the lines of communication open. And if you know something about your goals, don't hold that back from her. It can only inform her process as well.
All right. So I want to go back to a point you made earlier, which is how it's possible to use this editing process to improve aspects of your writing. I mean, I know I'd like to be a better writer, and so I suppose I could go to more writing workshops over the weekend. I could spend more time with my critique group, or I could take some more online courses from the Iowa Writers Workshop, or I could work with a professional editor. There's obviously a trade-off in time and money for all of those choices. Tell me about how working with the editor can help if approached correctly.
If you pay attention to all the changes that your editor makes, you can learn a lot. It's very focused feedback on your specific issues. And if you're really looking through that redlined manuscript and examining the track changes, you can drive your editor crazy by making her explain all the decisions that she made. And she's going to be sort of sweating first time to, make sure that everything she did change, she can back up. But that's our job. We follow our guts on a lot of things. We follow the rules when they really are rules. And there's some sort of middle ground that's a little mushy. Stylistic decisions that really are neither right nor wrong, but could make it better. Mm-hmm. So if you're not sure why your editor made a decision, just shoot an email and say, what's this about? I have one client who I'm about to work on his fourth book. The first couple, he made me defend every comma that I put in and took out. And I spent a lot of time working with him to understand what I was doing. And I pointed him towards the style and usage books that I really like and was using. Had conversations with him. And honestly, I don't think I would have enjoyed that with everyone, which is why the relationship is important. But he's got a 9-book series, and I knew that if both of us put in the time on these first few books, it was going to pay off later. So I spent the time answering all those questions. And the next book that he brought me, he had solved all those problems. He learned that lesson, and we got to deal with totally different things. And I can't remember if it was setting and description or telling details or, you know, I think the second book we were dealing with those, and the third was really character development and deepening their motivations and their responses. But we couldn't do those things quite as, you know, in quite as focused a way in the first book because all these stylistic issues with, you know, with just language were in the way. So the more you pay attention, the more you can learn from it.
So, you know, talk about developing, oh, Lynn's got a question. She says, which style books do you use and or recommend for authors?
Sure. I default to the Chicago Manual of Style because it's so thorough. There is pretty much everything in there. And because Chicago uses Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, I use that one. And they also recommend the, what is it called? It's a style, the American Heritage Guide to Contemporary Usage and Style. So those are really the 3 that I go for the most. I'm working mostly with, well, not mostly with fiction. I'm working with a lot of fiction and a lot of self-published authors. So adherence to specific style rules that change between style guides and publishing houses. If the author has a strong preference and it's not wrong, we'll go with that. But those are the 3 I use: Chicago, American Heritage, and Merriam-Webster.
Was it American Heritage Guide to Contemporary Style?
It is, I have to go look at it again, American Heritage Guide to Contemporary Usage and Style.
Usage and Style.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that book until a couple of years ago. It's wonderful. If you don't have that one, get it on your shelf, because all the things that people argue about are in that book.
You know, I talked to a lot of authors, and a few of them will say to me, you know, Bill, I appreciate that a professional edit is a good idea, but I don't want someone changing my words, or they might say changing my voice. How do I avoid that if I'm a particularly persnickety or opinionated, or I feel strongly about the words I put on the page? How do I overcome that fear and avoid that problem if I'm going to work with a professional editor?
Well, understand that you don't ever have to hire a professional editor. So if you hate the idea, don't do it.
Right.
Know what you're looking for. Know that you can find an editor who will absolutely leave your prose alone and only fix things that are really wrong or inadvisable. Know that whatever revisions we suggest are suggestions. And you can ask someone to query the changes in the margin. If you're especially in Microsoft Word, it's so easy to do this with comments, to highlight something and say what your issue with it is. You know, misplaced modifier, or I stumbled here because, or, you know, is this accurate? So that with authors who are very sensitive to changes like that, don't send them back a really marked up manuscript. They're not asking for it. They don't want it. You're only going to upset them.
Mm-hmm.
So ask the questions, let them come to the conclusion, and be okay with it. And then, you know, only really fight for the things that you feel are, and you here, I'm saying the editor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if the editor is in that mindset, then she'll only fight for the things that are really important to her. And the rest of it, you know, you don't want to die on that mountain.
Yeah, yeah. We made a huge mistake early on in the days of WaveCloud and BookFuel. We were offering a free edit of the first 10 pages of your manuscript, just to give you a feel for what could an editor do for you. And we have some in-house editors who were doing that. And we were just doing it reflexively. Someone would send something in and ask for a quote for conversion, and we would just go ahead and do the edit. And of course, our mistake was asking for permission. And we sent one of those edits back to someone who she had some very objectionable language with how angry she was with us, and accusing us of a hate crime and all kinds of terrible, awful things, which we didn't mean.
Right.
But it was very, you know, it helped us understand, whoa, wait a minute, just because it's free doesn't mean somebody wants it. And there are some people that feel strongly about their work. Okay,
yeah,
so let's.
well, and they're really different styles too. You can send the same chapter to 10 different editors who even have similar approaches, and you'll get back 10 different edits. So at that point, you sort of have to, you can get overwhelmed and become really indecisive and shut down to the whole process, because language is fluid. Fiction is fluid. There is no one right way to say anything. There are 100 right ways and, you know, several really wrong ways. And then, you know, some that are just better. But that's why you have to be asked. And I think it's why you have to be paid to revise someone's work, because inherent in that payment and contract is, you know, you're saying, I want this. And it's a reminder when you get it back and someone has suggested changes to your work, you really did ask for it. And that's not necessarily the case if you hand it to, you know, your spouse or your friend. Really, in those situations, you want praise and approval and maybe like very, very gentle feedback, but there are relationships at stake there. And the benefit of hiring a freelancer to hiring a professional to edit it is that, you know, the only emotions involved are about the work, and hopefully you can set those aside and have productive conversations about it.
Yeah, Anne's got a comment for. She says, I've had many problems with Microsoft Word and that system, and she recommends Apple. Do you do your editing on a Mac or PC, and which software program do you prefer to do it in? What do you prefer to receive the manuscript in?
I only work in Microsoft Word. I have a PC, but even if you're on a Mac, Microsoft Word is really the industry standard for editing because it has the most sophisticated, powerful editing options of any other program. You can work in Google Docs. I don't know what the Mac programs are. Scrivener also, but really Word is the way to go. It just makes it simple.
Do you ask the people you work with to send it to you in a certain format, perhaps double space, perhaps 1-inch margins? Assuming, of course, this is not. I'm not related to charging by page, but do you ask them to pre-format it before they send it?
I don't. Some people ask because they just want to present it to me in a really easy way, and that's always nice. But I let them know that I'm going to change it. It's not, if they've done a lot of, you've got a beautiful cover page with art and lovely fonts and everything's centered and spaced certain ways, I will take that out. Because I just need to be able to look at what's on the page, and fonts and weird spacing and all that stuff that makes a printed book really attractive and fun to read. It's so pretty that it turns my editing brain off and turns my I'm reading a finished book brain on. So when I start working on a manuscript, I'll put everything in Times New Roman, 12-point, double-spaced, 1-inch margins, half-inch first line indent, and I use, if you want to if you want to make your editor really happy, and you want to learn how to use Microsoft Word really well, learn how to use their automatic styles. Because those styles, like the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, when you use those for maybe parts or chapter headings, you can create an automatic table of contents that updates at just a click of a mouse and get a bird's eye view of your whole manuscript by using the document map. So anyone who would like to know more about that, I can tell you more about it, but it's kind of technical stuff.
Okay, so we've hit the half-hour mark. Here's what I'd like to do next. I'm gonna let's pretend for a minute that I've got 120,000 words in my manuscript. Okay, it's genre fiction. Could be thriller, romance, sci-fi, whatever. It's genre fiction. I really would like this to be the start of a writing career that allows me to quit my day job. I've just won the lottery, but not the big lottery. I won a little lottery, so now I don't even have to go and convince my spouse or my significant other to let me invest in the production of my book. So
basically you're a dream client.
I'm a dream client, right? So let's talk about a plan. So I do my very best to self-edit, and I send you the document, and you say to me, we should start with a critique. So what's that actually look like?
Sure. And you want to self-publish this book, right?
Yeah, I think I'm going to self-publish it. I'm a believer in that for lots of reasons.
So if money is no object.
No, I got to get value. It is an object. But
you'll absolutely get value. It's I'm going to give you all the options.
Okay.
Well, I'll give you the quick breakdown first. First, I would say set that book aside and leave it alone long enough to forget how you wrote each sentence. Go do something else. Start a new book, read a bunch of books, go on vacation, just get your head out of that book. And then come back to it and read it all the way through and figure out if you need to go through another draft. Do that as many times as possible until you get to the point where you're out of ideas. You've done everything you know how to do to it, and you're just sort of done.
Okay.
Then at that point, you're ready to get feedback on content. So a critique is the next step. You can hand this to your friends. You can give it to people in your critique group if you have one. Try and get as much free feedback as possible. And then at that point, it's probably time to look at editors. So start looking. Well, you should probably have started looking earlier. You're going to look for someone who does manuscript critiques on your genre. Maybe not an expert in your genre, because I don't think that's totally necessary, but they should have experience with critiques on fiction, nonfiction, whatever. What I'm saying is, like, you don't need, you know, a romance specialist, but you need someone who knows fiction.
Okay.
Then
Step 5.
That's what?
I'm on step 5 now. I'm taking notes as we go.
Are you? And I'm looking at my notes because I teach a workshop on this called Novel Revision 101, DIY and Collaborative Revision. And I'm kind of drawing from the notes for that, but also going a little off script, which is maybe a bad idea.
So I find someone to give me who's got enough, who I'm comfortable, can read my science fiction book, and give me a good critique of it. And they're going to give it back to me, and they're going to say, well, you forgot a character, and one of your characters doesn't have enough motivation, and you should work on making your dialogue more believable, or something like that.
Right, exactly. So you can get a critique, get some good feedback, then you want to take your time with that. Make sure you understand what that critique says. If it doesn't sit right with you, if it does sit right with you, talk to your editor afterwards. I have a mandatory follow-up phone call after each critique that's about a week after they've had a chance to go through the marked up manuscript and my critique letter. And it's long enough that they have had time to digest it, and soon enough afterwards that they haven't had too much time to stew on it. And I want to know how that came across, because I never want to leave someone just, you know, I don't want to put them on suicide watch.
Okay.
You know? Like, did this make sense to you? Are you energized to go into the next draft? Do you know what the next step is? And I always try to help them see what the next thing to do with this is. I point them towards great books that I've read on whatever their issue is, if it's, you know, point of view or tension or language issues, you know, like a certain book on language that might be good for that particular person. Then go through and do another draft, and that could take, depending on you, it could take a month and it could take a year, and it's just kind of up to you. You can bring it back for another critique. I've done up to 3 critiques on different manuscripts, and that's wonderful. I love it because I get to see this writer develop and this manuscript progress, but I understand that gets very expensive. But you said you won the lottery, so...
That's right. That's right. I'm the dream client. Yeah, and
right.
Lynn's got a specific question, I think, right where we are. She says, you know, so you talked about going out and getting a critique earlier from friends and family and your critique group and so forth. What are your thoughts on beta reads from your fan base?
I think those are fantastic. I have a beta reader group. I actually just started working with an editor who has a better beta reader group. Mine are sort of like wild. There's no guarantee that they'll actually read it and that they'll give full critique. They're unpaid, but they have, they do have a chance to choose which books I've got available for beta readers. So they are your book's specific, you know, audience. It's someone who is drawn organically to your book and wanted to read it. So then it's kind of up in the air whether they like it. And if they do like it, fantastic. I get their feedback, I communicate it to the author, I try and get that beta reader to promise to write an Amazon review, because those are so important for when that book first comes out. But sometimes they just don't read it, and it could be a variety of reasons. Life just got busy. They got bored and didn't push through the first 20 pages long enough to tell us why they got bored. They just really didn't like it and weren't comfortable telling the truth. Anyway, my friends' betas are much more qualified. They are anonymous. They are, she's worked with them in a lot of other capacities. She pays them, and they give really detailed feedback. And she tries to get promises for reviews for them too. I don't know how hard she pushes them for those.
Hey, while we're on that topic about beta reads from your fan base, how about taking this manuscript that I think is so good but is in critique stage and starting to load chapters of it in Wattpad or Figment if I'm really going after a younger audience? What do you think about that?
I think if you are the type of writer who will do that, absolutely. You have such a huge audience, a great possibility for finding new readers there, and they're really active communities. I don't have any clients right now who are really into that, but I taught a kids writing workshop over the summer, and these teenage girls were publishing basically serial fiction almost weekly on Wattpad, and had, got feedback all the time and had all these followers. It's just, I think it's really exciting. So go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Anne's got a question for us. As an editor, how many manuscripts are you able to do in a year? And what do you charge for, say, a 50,000-word project? And when do you decide a manuscript is complete? And I don't know. That's a trick question. I don't know if you get to decide.
Great questions. So one of them was how many I do in a year. I have been doing usually one copy edit a month and one critique. And in between there, I'm working on book descriptions and bios and doing some consulting. And so there are a lot of, and post-editing cleanup is important. That makes for a really hectic schedule, and over the summer I hired a few editors who are now working with me, and I get to work on fewer projects each month, which is such a gift. So where last year I was working on probably 2 or 3 books a month, next year it should be 1 book a month.
Wow, okay.
As for what I charge for a 50,000-word manuscript, it depends on whether you're coming to me for a critique or a copy edit. Critique, my rates are flat right now, and you can email me for them. Copy editing, there's a range. You can email me for those too. I'd be happy to tell you.
Okay, great.
But I do have, they're per word rates. I don't do hourly rates for editing or critique. I like to know what's coming in when. It's just easier bookkeeping. I think it's probably not the most effective way of billing, and other editors who can get their heads around other ways of doing it probably make more than I do.
Okay. Joe's got a comment. He says, I've got a dozen awesome beta readers who are fans of my work. Some, since my first novel was published in 2009, they are brutally honest and great at proofreading. That's nice. That's a nice resource, Joe. Okay, so let's get on with our plan. I'm at the step where you gave me the critique. I'm revising to the critique, and I'm creating another draft, and I think that's good, and I give it back to you. Now what do we do?
If you'd like me to do another critique, then I do that. If we decide we're ready for copy editing, we move into that phase. We book that, put it on the calendar. I don't like to put copy edits on the calendar while it's still being revised, or before the critique is finished, because even though you may think you need 3 months, it always needs more time, and we end up rescheduling. Okay. So we put the copy edit on the schedule and work towards that. That gives you time to set it aside again, maybe let some friends read it, get some more feedback. And when I get that for copy editing, then I'm only looking at language, because we've taken care of all the story stuff, and I'm going to assume that you know what you're doing with that. So at this point, I'm looking at grammar and style and flow, and sometimes cutting exposition, explanations that kind of make their way in. I'll query things every now and then, like, do you need this? what if we end this chapter a couple paragraphs early? Things like that, but it's very minor in terms of feedback on content. It's just language stuff.
Okay.
When I finish that, I send it back to you. I give you the marked up manuscript, and I also give you the clean copy, which is just all the changes accepted with the comments still in the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's your turn to go through it. I send instructions as well on how to do it the easy way and the hard way.
Okay, briefly, what is the difference between the easy way and the hard way?
Well, it's how much you want to work and how much you want to learn from that marked up manuscript. If you're going to treat this as your own personal writing class, you want to study that marked up manuscript. This requires a certain amount of technical knowledge of Microsoft Word, a lot of time, and the willingness to just really work through it. But it's a good idea to do it. The easy way is to go through the clean copy and make notes in the margins where you had questions as you're working, like, I thought I'd put this a different way, you know, put a little note that says check against markup or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then check those specific places in the marked up manuscript, but that way you're really targeting questionable areas rather than working through every single comma and, you know, phrase that's been tweaked a little bit.
Okay.
Then you send back your edits to me, and I do post-editing cleanup. And that's at an hourly rate. It's a discounted hourly rate because it's vital, but it does take, you know, it could take 3 or 5 hours if you didn't make a ton of changes. If you rewrite the manuscript after I copy edit it, it could take 20, which happened once and just made, you know, my stomach tie up in knots because I had made it really clear what needed to happen, but this author just, you know, he had a lot to say after the fact. He saw opportunities to really improve the story, but that means I'm re-editing new material. So then I send that back to you. We go back and forth a few times until it is clean, and then we finalize the document, and that is your edited manuscript.
Okay. And that's when I get to, if I am so inclined, either to do myself or have someone else do it for me, to go in and put all the nice formatting in and do the stuff I think needs to make it fancy and fun to read. Right.
And if you haven't put in, if you are self-publishing, make sure your editor sees the title page and the copyright information and the dedication.
The front matter and the back matter.
Exactly. That stuff tends to get overlooked and thrown in later, and then when you send your editor a copy of your paperback and she opens it and sees pages that she didn't see and there are commas that don't belong there and the capitalization is wrong on page 1 and the acknowledgement that thanked her is clearly, it's, you know, she appreciates it, but maybe you would have liked to have seen it earlier.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. I said we try to be shorter. I cut 9 minutes off, so I feel good about that.
That's good. You know what? I wanted to say one thing about Joe and his awesome beta readers.
Mm-hmm.
That is brilliant, and it brings up. I don't know if Joe's worked with a professional editor as well, but the more eyes you get on that finished manuscript, the better. No one editor is going to find every single mistake. There will be something in there that you will find later, and it's so smart and great if you've got people who can read them. I know every editor strives for perfection. We are perfectionists. Errors make us crazy. It's why we make our living doing this, because we're driven to fix that stuff. But nobody can catch everything, even with unlimited time and resources. You just get so accustomed to seeing that text that you miss it. And the reassuring thing is that for every one error she missed, there are probably 15,000 things that were way more serious that she did fix. Mm-hmm. If you're ever wondering, like, how did she miss these things, go in to Microsoft Word, and there's a way to see how many changes were made in that manuscript, and it will knock your socks off. So, I don't know. My therapy is to read traditionally published books and make a tick mark in the front cover for every error I find. I circle them in the text, and I put a tick mark, and it just makes me feel like, all right, I do excellent work. I have a very sharp eye. No one is perfect. We're all, this is a great book. Don't kill yourself now.
Yep. Joe says, absolutely. He said that his beta readers find 95% of the same things, but a few find things that nobody else does. So it's a great way to cross it out. Sarah's got a question for us. I think I know the answer, Sarah, because I've actually heard agents talk about this. She says, if you place your work up a little at a time, perhaps a chapter at a time or a scene at a time, on places like Figment or Wattpad, how does that affect your ability to go to the traditional route of publishing later? Actually, 2 years ago at BEA at You Publish You, which is I think it's the Saturday before or after BEA, depending on the year, there was a pretty prominent story of an author who had put their book up on Wattpad a chapter at a time, had come out of the experience with 500,000 followers or some insane number on Wattpad, and as a result, I think her name was Melanie something. As a result, a traditional publisher who, of course, they're all watching Wattpad, they're all watching Figment, picked her up for a traditional publishing contract and published that book. It doesn't happen to everybody, and I do know a couple of authors that have used Wattpad and Figment to generate pre-self-publishing press, which is always good. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so helpful. You really helped me learn some things that I hadn't thought about. Any last words for our audience before we sign off?
I think just keep writing, and if you are signing up for webinars like this and writing workshops and classes, you're already ahead of the game. You guys are paying attention and studying your craft, and you're just keep it up.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Meghan. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And if you heard this as a recording afterwards, thank you for listening this far. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
And thank you for having me, Bill. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. You're welcome, Meghan. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.